At graduation, Liam and I broke up. His eyes were full of hatred as he said he would definitely find a girl 100 times better than me. 8 years later, because of my husband's project, our old classmates gathered again. But Liam came with his girlfriend and handed out wedding invitations to us. Our classmates all looked at me with sympathy, because back then, he and I had loved each other like our lives depended on it. When the wedding invitation reached me, Liam gave me a half smile. I heard that all these years, you were so afraid of thinking about me that you didn't even dare contact our old classmates. But now I found the girl who belongs to me, so you should forget me. Just as I was about to speak, a little boy suddenly ran in from outside the door and threw himself at me. He shouted, "Mommy! Mommy!" The entire private room went silent in an instant. Dozens of pairs of eyes turned toward me all at once. I looked at the little boy throwing himself at me, with his round face and big eyes, and he was completely unfamiliar. This was not my child. I was just about to speak when the door to the private room was suddenly shoved open. A young woman rushed in, her face full of apology. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Leo, I told you not to run around." She scooped up the child and kept bowing to everyone. "I'm sorry for interrupting you." The woman hurried away with the child in her arms, and everyone let out a breath of relief. I knew it, how could Lena already have a kid? It was Zoe, who had sat behind me back then, and she had always loved gossiping. If she got married, how could none of us old classmates know? Someone immediately chimed in, "Exactly, Liam isn't even married yet, so how could she get married first?" As soon as those words came out, everyone's eyes swept back and forth between Liam and me again. Liam and I dated for 4 years in college. During those 4 years, he skipped required courses from the entire department for me and played guitar under my dorm building while singing off-key love songs. I waited for him for 3 hours in heavy snow just to give him a scarf I had knitted by hand. We squeezed into the cheapest rental near campus, shared a $6 bowl of beef noodles, and still thought it was the best food in the world. But on the eve of graduation, I broke up with him. I remembered his bloodshot eyes as he gripped my wrist tightly and asked, "Why?" I could not give him a reason. In the end, he flung me away, and the love in his eyes was swallowed by hatred. "Lena, in this lifetime, I will definitely find a girl 100 times better than you and make you regret it." Now, he had done it. He brought his fiancée and handed me that gold-embossed wedding invitation in front of all our old classmates. How was that a wedding invitation? It was clearly a slap to my face. Before I came, my roommate quietly told me that Liam had specifically asked in the group chat, "Is Lena coming?" All his setup was prepared for me. In the silence, Willa, who was beside Liam, suddenly stood up. She held a glass of wine and smiled warmly and gracefully, but there was a faint hint of provocation in her eyes as she looked straight at me. What happened in the past is all in the past. I'm very grateful that someone took care of Liam for me during those years. She said the words, "for me," very lightly, but they stabbed like needles. She paused, looked around the room, and finally turned her gaze back to Liam's affectionate face, her voice firm. "But from now on, the person who can stay by Liam's side can only be me, Willa." Well said. Someone started it first. Thunderous applause instantly rang through the private room, and someone even whistled. "Liam is so lucky." Willa said it perfectly. Liam took the chance to pull Willa into his arms, resting his chin on the top of her head with a doting expression. He raised his glass toward everyone, smiling with total satisfaction. "Thank you, everyone." I picked up the coffee cup in front of me and calmly took a sip. This situation had nothing to do with me. The scalding coffee slid down my throat. I lowered my eyes and pretended to study the delicate pattern on the rim of the cup. But from the corner of my eye, Liam's gaze kept drifting, intentionally or not, past the fiancé in his arms and landing on me. Liam's gaze was like a net, and there was hatred in that look. There was also love that had burned itself to ashes. And there was a trace of confusion that even he himself had never noticed. He did not understand 8 years ago, and now, he understood even less. My thoughts were instantly pulled back to that muggy summer night. In the study room of the university library. I was clutching an acceptance letter from an Ivy League school. It was the dream I had earned by staying up countless nights and giving up all entertainment. "Lena, what are you looking at so seriously?" Liam's voice came from behind me. He pressed a bottle of ice-cold Coke against my face, and I snapped back to myself with a jolt. "You scared me." "What are you thinking about, future big designer?" he asked with a smile as he sat down beside me, his eyes bright as if they were filled with stars. He had never doubted my talent, and he believed even more firmly than I did that I could stand on the world stage. "When we graduate, I'll open a tiny architecture studio. You'll be my chief designer. We'll rent a small apartment downtown, and it doesn't have to be big, just big enough for your drawing board and my models." Then we'll get a cat, a fat one, like a little pig. He rambled on about our future, and every word crashed into my heart and into the acceptance letter in my hand. Silently, I folded that piece of paper and tucked it into the deepest part of my book. It was like burying a grand dream. I turned to meet his gaze and said with a smile, "Okay. It's a deal." But in the end, I still broke that promise. "Lena?" Zoe's voice dragged me out of my memories. "Liam is asking you a question. Where are you working now?" Her tone was barbed, and everyone's eyes focused on me once again. Some wanted to watch the show, some were waiting for me to embarrass myself, and some were gloating. Liam let go of Willa, held his wineglass, and strolled over to me. He looked down at me from above. "What, you can't say it?" He let out a soft laugh, with 7 parts mockery and 3 parts satisfaction. Then again, the top student in our department back then had such high standards, so how could an ordinary job be good enough for you? Maybe you married some incredible man and got hidden away at home. With every word he said, the laughter around us grew louder. Willa leaned against him and added another cut at the perfect moment, her voice soft and innocent. "Liam, don't talk about Lena like that. Maybe she's just low-key." I raised my eyes and calmly looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar face in front of me. 8 years was enough to grind a sunny young man into a man covered in thorns. I picked up my coffee cup and lifted it toward him with composed movements. "Sorry to disappoint you. I'm just making a living at a small company." My calmness seemed to make him even angrier. "A small company?" He sounded as if he had heard the biggest joke in the world, and his pitch rose. "Lena, that wasn't what you said back then." He took a step forward and pressed closer to me. "Didn't you say I couldn't give you the life you wanted? What, 8 years have passed, and now you're willing to make a living at a small company? The life I wanted." "Ha." I sneered inwardly. "Liam, do you really know what I wanted?" The air in the private room seemed to freeze. "Why aren't you talking?" Liam moved closer, and the smell of alcohol mixed with an unfamiliar cologne made me frown. "Did I hit the truth and leave you speechless?" The satisfaction in his eyes almost overflowed. "Or are you really married, and that hidden husband of yours is just an Uber driver, so you're too ashamed to say it?" Suppressed snickers came from around us. Willa leaned in Liam's arms and gently tried to persuade him. "Liam, don't be like this, we're all old classmates." As she spoke, she picked up a glass of red wine. "Lena, let me toast you, and let the past stay in the past." She walked toward me, then suddenly twisted her ankle. "Ah!" A cry of alarm rang out. A full glass of red wine splashed perfectly across my moon-white dress. I'm so sorry, Lena." Willa apologized in panic, but a smug smile was hidden in her eyes. "I didn't mean to." Liam pulled her back into his arms without even looking at me. "You're still so clumsy, like a kid." There was not a trace of blame in his tone, only indulgence. He looked at me with icy eyes. "It's just a dress, Lena, you wouldn't be that petty, would you?" I said nothing. I only looked at him quietly. I looked at the man I had once loved for 4 full years. So time really could change a person. It could make him completely unrecognizable. I smiled. It was a very soft sound. But Liam's face instantly darkened. "What are you laughing at?" I raised my eyes, swept my gaze over him, and landed on Willa, whose face had gone pale in his arms. "I'm laughing at you. Liam." I slowly picked up the wet wipe on the table and gently wiped the hem of my dress with elegant movements. "You're right, it's just a dress." Willa clearly let out a breath of relief. The corner of Liam's mouth also curled back into a mocking smile, as if victory was already his. But then I changed the subject. "It's just a little troublesome. It was a wedding anniversary gift from my husband, and now that it's dirty, it'll be hard to explain to him." In an instant, the entire private room became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. All the color drained from Liam's face, and he stared at me as if he could not believe his own ears. "You're really married?" I raised my eyes, met his trembling pupils, and curved my lips into a perfect but cold smile. "What else? Did you think every woman in the world should wait for you, Mr. Harper?" His breath caught, and a storm I could not understand surged in his eyes. Willa clenched her fists and spoke softly, unwilling to give up. "Lena, stop joking, what does your husband do? And why didn't you invite any classmates when you got married?" That question was very skillful. It sounded casual, but it also hinted that my marriage was something shameful. I turned my head to look at her, my gaze falling on the sparkling diamond ring on her hand. "This dress really isn't that expensive." I lowered my head, my tone casual. "It's only about." I paused, met everyone's curious gaze, curled my lips, and said a few words. 10 times the price of the diamond ring on your hand. The entire room was shocked. Willa's face turned blue, then white, then red. Liam's fists clenched at his sides with cracking sounds, and he took a step forward, his eyes bloodshot. Lena. Who is your husband? When I heard his question, I met his bloodshot eyes and smiled. My husband. I deliberately dragged out the ending. He's a very petty man. He's also possessive. He doesn't like it when the things he gives me are dirted by other people. Willa's face was as pale as paper. But Liam was like a lit stick of dynamite. You're lying. He growled, his voice full of uncontrollable rage and a hint of panic even he himself had not noticed. Lena, you'll say anything just to piss me off. You were like this 8 years ago, and you're still like this now. Willa tugged at his sleeve, looking as if she was about to cry. Liam, don't be like this. Lena didn't mean it, let's go. She acted pitiful and also noticed that something about Liam's attitude was slightly wrong. I looked at her coldly. Shut up. Willa's crying stopped abruptly, and she looked at me in disbelief. My gaze returned to Liam. Liam, you're still the same as you were 8 years ago. Childish, impulsive, and always thinking the whole world should revolve around you. Who do you think you are? My voice was not loud, but every word cut straight to the heart. You. He suddenly stepped forward and grabbed my wrist. Say that again. A sharp pain shot through my wrist. Just like 8 years ago, he had also grabbed me like this and asked me why. I looked at him, and the last trace of warmth in my eyes faded away. Let go. Who is that man? What does he have that's better than me? His eyes were bloodshot. The classmates around us were silent with fear, and no one dared to step forward and say a word. I frowned from the pain, but I did not struggle. I only looked at him coldly. He is better than you in every way. That sentence completely shattered the last of his reason. He gripped me even harder, almost crushing my bones. Lena. Just then. The door to the private room was pushed open from the outside. Everyone's eyes were drawn to the man at the door. The light outlined the man's deep, cold features. It was a face so handsome it almost felt aggressive. He did not look at anyone. He only walked straight toward me. Lena. It was Julian Sterling, my husband. Liam seemed frozen in place as he stared stiffly at the man who had suddenly appeared, forgetting how to react. Julian's gaze slowly moved downward. It landed on the wrist Liam had gripped red. His eyes turned cold in an instant. Who gave you permission to touch my wife? The silence in the private dining room was no longer the awkward hush of a gossip-hungry crowd, it was the suffocating pressure of a sudden drop-in altitude. Julian Sterling did not hurry. He moved with the quiet, unbothered certainty of a man who owned the building, the land beneath it, and the sky above it. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that made the dim, gilded lighting of the private room look cheap. Raindrops still glistened on his broad shoulders, catching the low light like scattered diamonds. His eyes, cold, sharp, and gray as an Atlantic winter, never strayed to the stunned faces of my former classmates. They focused entirely on Liam's hand, which was still wrapped white-knuckled around my wrist. I'll ask you only once. Julian's voice was low, smooth as aged bourbon, but carrying a terrifying edge. Remove your hand from my wife. Liam stood frozen. 8 years of accumulated arrogance, carefully constructed to cover the raw wound of our breakup, seemed to stall out against the sheer presence of the man standing before him. Liam was tall, well-built, and dressed in an expensive designer suit, but next to Julian, he looked like a boy playing dress up in his father's closet. Who the hell are you? Liam snapped, his voice cracking slightly under the strain of forced bravado. This is a private gathering. Old classmates. She was talking to me. Julian didn't answer. He took 2 steps forward. He didn't raise his hands or make an aggressive gesture, but the air in the room shifted so violently that Willa reflexively took a step back, letting go of Liam's arm entirely. Julian reached out. His fingers, long and neatly kept, gently cupped the back of Liam's hand. He pressed a single pressure point on Liam's wrist with his thumb. Liam gasped, a sharp intake of breath, and his fingers uncoiled instantly. My hand fell free. In a single fluid motion, Julian pulled me into his side. His arm wrapped around my waist, warm, solid, and utterly unyielding. With his free hand, he gently lifted my bruised wrist, inspecting the faint red marks left by Liam's grip. A dark, dangerous shadow passed across his face. You bruised her, Julian murmured, his voice soft enough to be a whisper, yet every person in that silent room heard it. Julian, I said softly, leaning my head slightly toward his shoulder, feeling the steady, rhythmic beat of his heart against my cheek. It's fine. Let's just leave. Is it? Julian turned his head, his lips grazing my temple. Your dress is ruined, Lena. And a man who hasn't earned the right to speak to you is putting his hands on you. Wait a second. Zoe, who had been sitting near the head of the table, suddenly stood up, her phone slipping from her fingers and clattering onto the tablecloth. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Julian's face. You're Julian Sterling? The CEO of Sterling Global Architecture? A collective gasp echoed across the room. Sterling Global wasn't just a big company. It was the company. They held the contracts for the city's newest landmarks, the international airport expansion, and the billion-dollar waterfront revitalization project, the exact project Liam's firm had been desperately trying to secure a subcontract for over the past 6 months. Liam's face went from flush red to a sickly, ash gray in a matter of seconds. He looked at Julian, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Sterling? Liam stammered, his bloodshot eyes darting between us. No. That's impossible. Lena, you said you worked at a small company. I smoothed down the front of my moon-white silk dress, ignoring the wine stain. That ruined the fabric. I looked Liam dead in the eye. I do, I said calmly. I run Studio V. We have 8 employees. We do custom residential design. It's small. Studio V? Another classmate blurted out. Studio V designed the new National Museum. That studio won the Pritzker shortlist last year. Yes, Julian chimed in, his gaze dropping to Liam with cool indifference. My wife built her studio from the ground up without taking a single dollar from my firm. She preferred to do it on her own terms. Though, as her husband, I occasionally insist on buying her clothes. He glanced down at my dress again, his tone darkening. This dress was a piece from the late Alexander McQueen's private archive. I spent 3 months sourcing it for our 3rd anniversary. Willa's face went completely pale. She shrank back behind Liam, her hand unconsciously hiding her 1-carat diamond ring behind her back. 10 times the price of her ring? The dress was worth more than her entire wedding budget. Liam shook his head, refusing to accept the reality crumbling around him. No. Lena, you broke up with me because you said you wanted a simple life. You told me you couldn't do it anymore. And now you're married to him? To a billionaire? He stepped forward, his self-control completely snapping. You lied to me. You threw me away for money. The raw hatred in his voice from 8 years ago came pouring back out. Unvarnished and hideous. Julian's eyes narrowed, a lethal stillness settling over him. He made a slight movement to step between me and Liam, but I gently laid a hand on Julian's chest, stopping him. This was my past. I needed to bury it myself. I took a step out from under Julian's arm and faced Liam. Liam, I said, my voice steady, ringing out clearly in the dead quiet of the room. I broke up with you 8 years ago because your father had taken out an illegal high-interest loan using your family home as collateral to fund your startup company. The loan sharks were coming to burn your parents' house down. And your father was on the verge of heart failure. Liam stopped dead in his tracks. What are you talking about? You didn't know, did you? I gave a faint, sad smile. Your father came to my dorm room 3 days before graduation. He knelt on the concrete floor in front of me, crying, begging me not to tell you because your pride would make you throw your career away to go fight those loan sharks. He needed $200,000 to clear the debt and save his life. The room was so quiet you could hear the rain heavy against the glass windows. I didn't have $200,000, I continued quietly. I had an acceptance letter to Yale's master's program and a fully funded fellowship, sponsored by the Sterling Foundation. I went to the foundation's director. I gave up my spot, signed a 10-year binding design work contract with Sterling Global, and took an advance on my future salary to pay off your father's debt. Liam stared at me, his eyes wide with absolute horror. No, you're making this up. My dad told me, he said he got a private bank loan. Check the records, Liam, I said softly. The debt was cleared on June 12th. 8 years ago. The exact day I told you I didn't love you anymore. I looked at him, at the man who had hated me for 8 years, who had carried that hatred like a badge of honor, who had brought his fiancée here tonight just to crush my spirit in front of everyone we used to know. I let you hate me, I said, because hating me gave you the energy to keep fighting and build your career. I let you think I was shallow, heartless, and cruel. Because if you knew the truth, your fragile pride would have broken, and you never would have stepped into that studio you wanted so badly. Liam's knees shook. He stumbled backward, his back hitting the edge of the dining table, knocking over a crystal goblet. Wine spilled across the white linen, looking like fresh blood. Lena. He whispered, his voice trembling violently, all the mock confidence instantly stripped away. Lena, why didn't you tell me? Why? Because you were childish then, Liam, I replied, looking at him with neither love nor anger, but a vast, empty calm. And looking at you tonight, handing out invitations like weapons, pulling your fiancé around like a trophy. I see you haven't grown up at all. Julian stepped up beside me once more. He didn't look at Liam with anger anymore. He looked at him with the cold, effortless pity of a man who had won long before the game even started. Julian put his hands in his pockets, his gaze sweeping over the silent, mortified crowd of our former classmates. My wife gave up 8 years of her youth to save your family, Julian said, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. She worked 18 hours a day in my firm to pay off that advance, never complaining once. I spent 4 years watching her rebuild her life from the ashes, and another 2 years convincing her that she deserved to be loved by someone who wouldn't break her. Julian reached out and took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. His ring, a thick, unadorned band of platinum, gleamed in the soft light, matching mine perfectly. You wanted to know who her husband is, Mr. Harper? Julian looked at Liam, his expression utterly devoid of warmth. I am the man who knows her worth. And as for your firm's bid on the Sterling waterfront project. Liam looked up, terror piercing through his despair. Consider it denied, Julian said simply. Not because of personal malice, but because a man who uses his personal achievements as a weapon against women lacks the character required to build something meant to stand for generations. With that, Julian turned to me, his features softening instantly into a look of tender devotion. Come on, darling. The car is waiting downstairs, and the rain is getting heavy. I didn't look back at Liam. I didn't look at Willa, who was staring at the floor in mute shame, nor at Zoe and the others who had spent the evening waiting to see me humiliated. I turned my back on the ghosts of my youth, wrapped my coat tightly around myself, and walked out of the room hand in hand with the man who truly held my heart. The Bentley rolled smoothly through the rain-slicked streets of the downtown financial district. Inside the cabin, the soft amber ambient light glowed against the dark leather, insulating us from the chaotic world outside. I sat silently, looking out the tinted window at the reflection of city lights, blurred by raindrops. My hand was still held tightly in Julian's lap. He hadn't let go since we left the restaurant. You're quiet, Julian said softly, his thumb gently stroking the back of my hand, right over the dark mark where Liam's fingers had dug in. Just tired, I murmured, turning to look at him. And a little sad. Julian's hand stilled. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sad for him? No, I said, reaching up with my free hand to touch the side of his face, feeling the faint stubble along his sharp jawline. Sad for the girl I was 8 years ago. She spent so much time believing that love had to be painful, that it had to involve sacrifice, secrets, and suffering. Julian lowered his head, pressing his lips to the palm of my hand. The heat of his breath sent a quiet shiver down my spine. And now, he asked, his dark eyes searching mine. Now I know love is just you, I smiled softly. Coming into a room and standing by me, even when my dress is ruined. Julian's eyes darkened with an intensity that always made my breath catch. He leaned in, closing the distance between us, his lips pressing firmly against mine. The kiss was deep, slow, and possessive, carrying the familiar warmth that had anchored me through the hardest years of my life. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm on my Lips. I hated hearing him say your name, Julian admitted, his voice a low growl. I hated that he ever touched you. If we weren't in public, Lena, I would have broken his arm. I know, I whispered, wrapping my arms around his neck. That's why I stopped. He wasn't worth your hands getting dirty. The car came to a smooth stop beneath the grand portico of the Sterling residence, a private penthouse occupying the top 3 floors of the tallest glass tower in the city. The doorman stepped forward with a large black umbrella, opening the door for us. Julian stepped out first, then turned and effortlessly lifted me out of the seat, carrying me past the lobby guards before I could even protest. Julian. I can walk. I laughed, clutching his shoulders as the elevator doors closed behind us, whisking us up to the 60th floor in total silence. Your dress is ruined, your shoes are wet, and you're marked, Julian said, his eyes fixed on the elevator floor counter. Tonight, you don't walk anywhere. When the doors slid open directly into our private foyer, the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the storm-swept city below. The lights of the skyline flickered through the mist like a sea of fallen stars. Julian carried me straight into the master suite, setting me down gently on the edge of the vast, king-sized bed. Without a word, he knelt before me, unbuckling the wet straps of my high heels and slipping them off my feet. He looked up at me from his knees, his fingers tracing the soft curve of my ankle. I'm going to run a bath for you, he said softly. Julian, I called out as he stood up. He paused, turning back. Thank you for coming tonight, I said. I didn't call you. You didn't have to, Julian replied, a faint, rare smile touching his lips. Assistant Chen saw the group chat rumors floating around your university alumni page 3 days ago. He told me Harper specifically asked if you were coming. I blinked in surprise. You been tracking this? I don't leave things to chance when it comes to you, Lena, Julian said, his tone entirely matter-of-fact. I knew what he wanted to do. I knew he wanted to humiliate you to heal his own wounded pride. I was waiting downstairs in the car. From the moment you stepped inside, my heart swelled, a mixture of warmth and profound gratitude filling my chest. I stood up, walked over to him, and unbuttoned his suit jacket, letting it fall to the carpeted floor. You were waiting the whole time? 3 hours, Julian murmured, his arms wrapping around my waist, pulling me flush against his hard frame. I gave you your space because I knew you needed to face the ghost. But the moment he put his hands on you, my patience ran out. I'm glad it did, I whispered, reaching up to unfasten his silk tie. Julian leaned down, his lips trailing down my neck, sending a wave of electric heat through my veins. The McQueen dress is destroyed, he murmured against my skin. I'll have to buy you 10 more. 10. I gasped softly as his hands reached behind me, smoothly unzipping the wet silk dress, letting it rustle down to the floor around my feet. 20, Julian corrected, his voice dark and thick with desire as he lifted me into his arms once more, carrying me toward the steaming warm water of the marble bath. Whatever it takes to make you forget the taste of the past. While the storm raged outside the quiet comfort of our penthouse, a different kind of tempest was tearing through a mid-tier architectural office on the other side of the city. Liam Harper sat at his heavy oak desk, 3 empty glasses of whiskey sitting on the mahogany surface. The lights in the office were off, save for the single desk lamp casting long, distorted shadows across the blueprints scattered across his work surface. Across from him, Willow was pacing back and forth, her heels clicking loudly against the hardwood floor. Her face was flushed, her voice shrill with a mixture of anger and panic. We are ruined, Liam. Do you understand? She practically yelled, throwing her hands in the air. The Sterling waterfront contract was 50% of our projected revenue for the next 3 years. The bank is going to call in our line of credit by Monday if they hear we lost the bid. Liam didn't answer. He stared blankly at his laptop screen, which displayed an old, saved photograph from 8 years ago. It was a low-resolution photo taken on a cheap phone camera. A young, bright-eyed Lena, wearing a plain yellow sundress, sitting on the grass outside the library, holding a cheap $6 bowl of beef noodles, smiling radiantly at the camera. I'll be your chief designer, her voice echoed in his memory, soft and full of hope. We'll rent a small apartment downtown. It doesn't have to be big. Liam squeezed his eyes shut as a sharp, agonizing pain seized his chest. All these years. 8 long, bitter years. He had hated her. He had stayed up late nights drinking himself to sleep, whispering her name like a curse. He had pushed himself to the brink of physical exhaustion to build his company, driven purely by the insane, obsession-fueled desire to stand in front of her one day and say, "Look at me. Look at what I built without you. You were wrong." And tonight, he had done it. He had staged the perfect scene. He had brought a beautiful fiancée, a 3-carat diamond ring, a custom suit, and an invitation wrapped in gold foil. He had prepared a trap to crush her pride. And instead, she had gently, ruthlessly torn open the fabric of his entire reality. She hadn't abandoned him for money. She had sold her own future to pay off his father's debts. She had taken the blow, suffered in silence, and spent 8 years working under the most powerful man in the industry, a man who now looked at her as if she were the only bright star in a dark universe. "Liam. Are you even listening to me?" Willa slammed her palms down on the desk, shattering his train of thought. Liam slowly lifted his head, his eyes red and glassy. "Willa. Stop talking. Stop talking." Willa sneered, her composure completely shattered. "You brought me to that stupid reunion to play the role of your dutiful, perfect fiancé. You used me to make your ex-girlfriend jealous. And now we're going to lose the firm, lose our house, and you're sitting there pining over a woman who wouldn't even look at you if you were on fire." I said, "Stop talking." Liam's voice dropped, terrifyingly cold. Willa gasped, taking a step back. You still love her." It wasn't a question. It was a realization that hit her like a cold bucket of water. "You don't care about the firm," Willa said, her voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "You don't care about our wedding. You never cared about me. I was just a prop to you." Liam stood up slowly, leaning his hands on the desk. "My father's debt," he said, his voice raspy. 8 years ago. Did you know about it?" Willa's eyes flickered with a sudden, telltale burst of guilt. She bit her lower lip, turning her head away. Liam's heart sank into a dark, bottomless pit. Willa's father had been his father's accountant back then. "You knew," Liam whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Your family knew she paid it off. So what if we did?" Willa screamed, pushed into a corner. "Your father was an idiot who almost ruined your family. Lena was a nobody with no background. My father helped clean up the mess. If I had told you back then, you would have run after her like a dog, broke and ruined. I saved you." "You didn't save me," Liam said, his voice deathly quiet. "You let me live a lie. For 8 years. You let me hate the only person who ever truly cared about me. Liam, listen to me." "Get out," Liam said, turning his back on her. "What?" "Get out of my office. Get out of my house. The wedding is off." Willa stared at him in utter disbelief. "You're crazy. She's married to Julian Sterling. She doesn't want you. She looks at you like you're trash on the side of the road. You think you can just apologize and she'll come running back to you?" I said. "Get out." Liam roared, sweeping his arm across the desk, sending his laptop, files, and glasses crashing onto the floor in a shattering mess. Willa flinched, tears of rage finally spilling over her cheeks. "You'll regret this, Liam Harper. By Monday morning, your company will be bankrupt, and you'll have nothing left." She slammed the door violently behind her, her high heels echoing down the empty corridor until total silence returned to the dark office. Liam sank down onto his knees amidst the broken glass and scattered paper. He picked up the faded, printed photograph of Lena from the floor. His tears finally broke, falling thick and heavy onto her smiling face, smudging the ink of a memory that was never his to keep. 3 weeks passed. The city seemed to move on from the rainstorm, blooming into the crisp, golden days of early autumn. For me, life continued with a peaceful, satisfying rhythm. Studio V had just finalized the blueprint for the city's new public library, a project that focused heavily on sustainable timber and natural lighting. Julian had spent his evening sitting quietly in my home studio, working on his laptop, while I sketched late into the night, occasionally getting up to place a warm cup of herbal tea beside my drawing board. He never brought up Liam. He never brought up the reunion. He simply wrapped me in a quiet, unwavering security that allowed me to flourish. On a chilly Friday evening, the annual Grand Architecture and Design Gala was held at the Grand Palais Hotel. It was the premier event of the year, where industry leaders, investors, and elite creators gathered to showcase their work and network. I wore a floor-length emerald green velvet gown, off the shoulder, paired with a simple diamond choker that Julian had given me for my birthday. My dark hair was swept up in an elegant, loose updo. Julian walked by my side, his tall, imposing figure attracting attention the moment we entered the grand ballroom. Mrs. Sterling, your design for the library shortlist was brilliant, a prominent city council member remarked, raising his glass to me. The integration of green space inside the reading halls is revolutionary. Thank you, Councilman, I smiled warmly. Architecture should feel like a breathing living thing, not just concrete. Spoken like a true artist, Julian murmured proudly beside me, his hand resting comfortably on the small of my back. As we moved through the room, mingling with international guests, a sudden hush fell over a nearby cluster of guests. I turned my head slightly and saw a figure standing near the entrance of the ballroom. It was Liam. He looked unrecognizable. In just 3 weeks, he seemed to have lost a significant amount of weight. His tuxedo hung loosely on his frame, his hair was unkempt, and dark circles shadowed his hollow eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. Security guards at the door were blocking his path, checking his invitation. Sir, this invitation has been revoked, the guard said firmly. Harper. Architecture is no longer on the registered guest list. Please, Liam's voice was hoarse, desperate. I just need 10 minutes. I just need to speak to Mrs. Sterling. Just 10 minutes. Several guests turned to stare, whispering behind their gloved hands. Isn't that Liam Harper? I heard his firm went under last week. Yes, his main investors pulled out after the Sterling contract fell through. And his fiancée broke off the engagement. Turns out her family's accounting firm was involved in some massive financial fraud. Tisk, pathetic. Trying to crash a private gala like this. I watched the scene unfold with a quiet sigh. Julian felt me freeze beside him. He turned his eyes toward the door, his jaw tightening slightly. Do you want me to have security escort him out of the building entirely? I looked at Liam. He looked so broken, so utterly defeated, standing there, begging a security guard just to step into a room he once dreamed of dominating. No, I said quietly. Let me talk to him one last time. In public, where he can finally see reality. Julian looked down at me, his eyes softening. Are you sure? Yes, I answered, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. I need him to stop drowning in the past. Julian nodded slowly. I'll be right here. I walked smoothly across the polished marble floor toward the entrance. As I approached, the security guards straightened up, bowing their heads respectfully. Mrs. Sterling. Liam froze. He looked at me as I stopped a few feet away from him, separated by the velvet rope. Lena. He whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. Lena, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Let him in, I instructed the guards softly. The guards unhooked the rope. Liam took a shaky step forward, reaching out a hand as if trying to touch my arm, but he pulled it back, trembling, afraid he might ruin the moment. Lena, he breathed, tears welling up in his bloodshot eyes. I know everything. Now. I went to my father. He confessed everything. He told me how you gave up your Ivy League spot, how you took the foundation debt, how you saved us. I remained standing tall, my hands lightly clasped in front of my emerald dress. I know you know, Liam. I broke off the engagement with Willa, he rambled, his words tumbling over each other in a desperate rush. Her family lied to me. They kept the truth from me. I threw my whole life away hating you, Lena. But I don't hate you anymore. I love you. I've always loved you. I never stopped loving you for a single day. The surrounding guests gasped softly at his outburst, but I didn't flinch. I looked at him with profound sorrow, not for what we had lost, but for what he had done to himself. Liam, I said, my voice gentle, calm, and utterly devoid of romantic affection. You don't love me. He blinked, stunned. What? No. I do. I swear to God, You don't love me, I repeated, cutting him off with quiet authority. You love the idea of a girl who made you feel like a hero back in college. And then, when I left, you loved the idea of a phantom you could blame for all your failures and insecurities. No, that's not true. It is true, I said softly. If you loved me, you would have trusted me 8 years ago. You would have looked at the 4 years we spent together and known that I wouldn't leave you for something shallow. But you didn't trust me. You immediately believed the worst of me because it was easier for your pride to digest. Liam stood frozen, every word hitting him like an iron beam. And tonight, I continued, looking into his hollow eyes, you don't love me now either. You just want me back because I am out of your reach. You want to fix your broken pride once again. Lena, please. A tear finally escaped his eye, tracking down his hollow cheek. Give me a chance. I'll rebuild everything. I'll start over. Just come back to me. We can rent that small apartment downtown, we can get that fat cat, just like we planned. My heart ached slightly for the memory of 2 young kids dreaming in a dusty library 8 years ago, but the woman standing here tonight belonged to the present. That dream died 8 years ago, Liam, I said firmly. I buried it the day I signed my contract with Sterling Global. I took a half step back, stepping into the warm shadow of Julian, who had walked up behind me, placing a strong, protective hand on my shoulder. Look at me, Liam, I said. Liam looked up, his tears blurring his vision as he saw me standing beside Julian. We stood together, not as a display of wealth or power, but as 2 people, bound by years of deep trust, mutual respect, and an undeniable, unshakable devotion. I am happy, I told him, looking him in the eye. I am loved by a man who respects my work, protects my peace, and never doubts my character. I love my husband with all my heart. And even if I weren't married to Julian, I would never go back to you. The finality in my voice was absolute. It was not shouted in anger, it was delivered with the quiet, crushing weight of undeniable truth. Liam's shoulders slumped. The last remaining light in his eyes flickered out, replaced by a deep, quiet realization that the door to his past was locked forever, and the key had been thrown into the ocean. I understand, Liam choked out, his voice barely audible above the light classical music playing in the ballroom. I'm sorry, Lena. For everything. He turned slowly, his steps heavy and dragging, and walked away down the grand, carpeted hallway of the hotel, disappearing into the shadows of the night. The rest of the evening passed smoothly. Liam's departure marked the final, decisive close of a chapter that had lingered in the background of my life for far too long. The whispers among the elite guests quickly turned away from the drama and focused back on the future of design and architecture. By midnight, the gala was wrapping up. Julian and I stood on the private balcony of the hotel suite, looking out at the city skyline. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain and fallen autumn leaves. Julian pulled a warm cashmere coat around my shoulders, wrapping his arms around me from behind, burying his face in the crook of my neck. Are you okay? He murmured, his breath hot against my skin. I'm better than okay, I replied, leaning back against his broad chest, placing my hands over his. I feel light. Like I'm finally standing on solid ground. Julian smiled against my neck, his arms tightening around me. You always were solid, Lena. Even when you were carrying the world on your shoulders. I turned around in his arms, looking up into those stormy gray eyes that had become my safe harbor. You knew, didn't you? I asked softly. When you hired me 8 years ago. You knew about the loan. Julian went quiet for a moment, his fingers gently adjusting a stray strand of hair behind my ear. I ran the Sterling Foundation, Julian admitted quietly. When a brilliant young woman came into my office, willing to sign away 10 years of her career. Freedom just to pay off a debt for a boy who didn't deserve her. I wanted to see what kind of person had that much strength. And what did you see? I saw a masterpiece, Julian whispered, his eyes gleaming with intense, raw affection. I saw a woman who was too rare for the world she was in. I told Myself that day that I would give her the platform she deserved. And I promised. Myself that one day, I would make her fall in love with me, not out of gratitude, but because she saw me as her equal. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, not tears of sadness, but of an overwhelming, radiant happiness. You succeeded, I whispered, reaching up on my tiptoes to press my lips to his. You succeeded long ago, Julian Sterling. Julian caught me in his arms, lifting me slightly as his lips met mine in a deep, passionate kiss that seemed to erase every shadow, every cold rainy night, and every painful memory from my past. The city light sparkled beneath us, vast and brilliant, stretching out into a bright, endless horizon. There were no more echoes of old promises, no more debts to pay, and no more ghosts to fight. Standing in the arms of the man who truly loved me, I knew that my story wasn't about surviving the past, it was about building a grand, magnificent future.